Welcome to the Out of Your Comfort Zone podcast. On today's episode,
It was really like I was going home.
But as a group, we did get stared at a lot.
However, I felt really comfortable in Korea as a Black woman.
we'll be speaking to 6 students about their experience as people of color studying abroad. Hi, and welcome to our next episode of the Out of Your Comfort Zone podcast. This is an episode that we here at CIEE are really excited about, and I think is a really important conversation to begin to have, and a conversation that we want to continue to have over many episodes and conversations, right? And so today's episode is going to be focusing on the experience of American students of color as they study abroad. So we have with us 5 students, 5 CIEE alumni who studied abroad last summer. And we have with us 2 moderators tonight, my colleagues Amira and Justin, who are going to help out and really lead the conversation. Amira is one of our GEAs, our Global Education Ambassadors in the DMV area. And Amira has extensive experience studying abroad. She studied abroad 3 times and has traveled abroad extensively. So she has a lot of knowledge to share with the students, and she'll definitely be able to help guide that conversation. And then we have Justin, who is a professional trainee with CIEE. It's a year-long program that allows recent college graduates to cycle through many different departments of CIEE and work on different projects for a year, and really work on project management. And Justin has been connected with us to really help develop these, a lot of podcast ideas that we're going to have moving forward in the future for students of color, because it's a very important conversation to have in many aspects. It's important, I think, to give our students an outlet to talk about their experience. First of all, our alumni. It's important for you guys, but it's also important for students who are looking to go abroad, whether they are a student of color or not, right? If they're a student of color, to help them understand what some of the nuances of the experience may be. And for white students as well, as Justin pointed out, that, are going to be bystanders and may witness some microaggressions as they're abroad, and how can they intervene. So we are very excited. We have with us Tiffany. Tiffany studied in Seoul this summer. We have Sarah. Sarah also studied in Seoul. We have Marriyan, who studied in Rabat. Manuela, who studied in Rome this past summer. And Pia, who studied in Santiago de los Caballeros in the Dominican Republic. So welcome, all of you. And thank you for being here. And we also have Dana joining us. Dana was also in Rome. We'll give her a moment to get set up, but as she does, I will pass the mic to Amira and Justin to really get the conversation going and ask our participants their first question.
Thank you, Pri. So my first question is, as someone who's in high school, I'm always curious about why, as a high school student, you chose to study abroad. I feel like that's a very niche thing to do, and not many kids in high school are thinking about studying abroad. So I'm curious as to why you studied abroad and how you got to the point to where you knew you were ready to leave the country and leave your home.
I have an answer to that, if I can go first. My family is very big into travel. Travel has always been a part of my life. And ever since I was little, I've experienced so many different cultures and so many different experiences all over the world. And my parents actually studied abroad in high school as well, and so they're like passing down the tradition. And so it was my mom who really encouraged me to study abroad in high school because she knew personally for herself, like it was such a life-changing experience, and she wanted me to have that as well. I know one of the reasons I did. Oh, go ahead. Okay, one of the reasons why I did it was because I wanted to make sure that I, I had motivation to keep studying Korean because I had just kind of transferred over from doing French, and Korean was really going to be like my focus and what I really wanted to keep doing over the rest of my life. And there was no language program, so I decided to go on the program that I did because it was one of my interests, and I also got to see the country. And like I said, and like Pia said, I was also a person who really liked to travel, and my parents travel, and my family, everybody in my family travels. And my mom said she wished she would have done a study abroad when she was in high school. So I took it as a perfect opportunity to make us both proud and to find out if this was something I really wanted.
I found that CIEE would offer things I can otherwise find in my home country, which is mainly cultural immersion and independence.
And just to piggy off of Justin's question, when you guys were, you finally decided you wanted to study abroad. Oh, and I know Brianna gave you guys some pre-work to look at your, reflect on your identities and how they intersect. When you made the decision, how did you make that next decision on where to study abroad? I remember when I wanted to study abroad and I was looking at all these places, and as a student of color, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I want to go to Latin America and I want to go to Peru, but I've never seen a Peruvian as dark as me. Like, how am I going to get my hair? Like, how am I going to keep up with my hair when I'm there? Am I going to get stared at? I don't really speak the language that well. So I just want to know, when you guys were making the decision on like where to go, what was in the back of your mind as you're making that decision? Anyone can start.
Yeah, I feel like I could speak a lot on this topic because on top of being a student of color, I'm also Muslim. So that was something that I really had to think about when picking the location. I talked about it a lot with my parents because I really wanted to go to Germany, but my parents were kind of scared that I would lose my faith and like wouldn't have time to do the 5 daily prayers. And after studying abroad, I could definitely see why they had that fear because we're kind of always doing something. But since I was in Morocco, there were always like mosques to stop and pray at, and our teachers were really understanding. So when we were on long road trips for like the weekend trips, we got to stop like every 3 hours or so and be able to pray at a mosque because it's Morocco. So there were a lot of mosques nearby.
So that's a great point. Like, also, identifying your religion when you are traveling abroad. So anybody else have another identity that really made a huge factor of their decision, or was a huge factor into their decision? Tiffany? I think one of the reasons I chose Seoul was because it was a very like metropolitan, very current, and kind of very accepting area. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, as in me being African American and Korea being a very like homogenous country, I guess. I was definitely influenced by my Korean teacher telling me I should just go and like try the foods and practice using your language and all of that. But I know I was definitely a little bit scared, but then I think I just kind of got over my fear, and like my parents pushed me and decided for me that I was going to go to Korea just because you only live once and you got to try. And even if some places somewhat different and people are different from you, that you shouldn't let that be the one reason why you don't go somewhere amazing that could change your. Right. That's a great point. And I don't think a lot of people reflect on that when they're choosing a location, being in like the metropolitan area versus like a small town. I know I had way different experiences being in Mexico City versus being in Tulum or Cancun, those being huge tourist destinations versus like people's day-to-day life and not really having a lot of people of color in that city. Would anyone else like to add to a huge factor that made them choose the country that they chose?
I mean, I was not very hesitant. I mean, I had chosen Santiago because I wanted to practice my Spanish. Um, but I'm Indian, born and raised. And so I knew like the culture was the same or similar, and the weather and the customs were similar. And so actually I was really excited. Um, but I was hesitant because um, it's very conservative, and being a queer, trans person, neurodivergent person, I was a little hesitant about how it would be received, because I didn't really want to mask or change myself. But I also wanted my experience to be like a good experience. Um, but when I got there, I was floored by how welcoming they were, and my host mom immediately took me under her wing, and, it was just like it was so inviting and, amazing to be there because of how, easily they were able to, like, take me in.
I think
For
for me,
sharing.
I mostly, oh, sorry. I
No, go
think
ahead.
for me, was mostly language barriers. Because when I was choosing mine, my mom and my mom and my French teacher, she was like, you have to think about like, are you able to speak the language? And I speak Spanish. That's my first language, and I'm learning French in school. So I thought, well, if I can't, I don't know the Italian language, but I do know Spanish, and I do know that there's a lot of Spanish tourists in Italy, and I speak a little bit of French. So it wasn't really much gonna I was assuming it wasn't gonna be much of like uh much of a problem for me to be able to communicate. Thankfully it wasn't.
I think something I've heard as I've listened to everyone is the mention of parents and how most of you and encourage this. And so I'm curious for my own personal reasons because I had a huge time convincing my mom and getting her on board. So how was y'all's experience when it came to telling your parents, bringing up this conversation with your parents? Tiffany, mom, I want to go to Korea. How was that? How did your parents react? What were their first thoughts? And were they reluctant? And if they were reluctant, how did you sell the idea to them?
My dad was so on board with it. I was texting them during the interest meeting. I was so excited. I was like, Mom, Dad, I want to go to Korea. They have a program that I want. I want to do it. I want to do it. My dad, when I came home to tell them and give them like a little speech, he was so on board. He was so ready. He was just like, great, let's do it. My mom, it took a lot of convincing to get her on board. Not that she didn't want me to go. It was more of like a safety concern, especially because I'm one of the people that's very close to my mom and dad. I haven't been to sleepaway camp. I don't do sleepovers. I've never like gone overnight away from my parents. So not even going to summer camp, but deciding to go over 5,000 miles away to a place where they don't even speak the same language as me was something that was really hard, especially because I was so young and I was like just going into high school when I did it. And so it took a while to convince her. She talked to everybody available, the hairstylist, the counselors at the school, the Korean teacher, the principal, other parents whose child have done CIEE. She got everybody's opinion. But thankfully, I think she trusted me enough to let me go and decided that she had raised me right and that I would be able to take care of myself and that everyone would be able to take care of me there and that I'd be okay because of how she raised me and just personal knowledge of the country and that all the trust that I kind of like put into her from CIE, just telling her all these different things about, oh, they've been doing this for 75 years. Oh, somebody else did it. Somebody else did it. And so I think that's how she eventually came around.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have a similar answer to Tiffany. My mom was also quite hesitant on letting me study abroad because, safety concerns and going to a completely foreign country to her and to me. And another thing was that I've never traveled like to a different country. And so this would be my first time and I'm doing it alone, which is obviously a thing to be concerned about. But I think what really helped her be convinced was the amount of resources CIEE provided. Like they have a bunch of stuff on how they protect us, what they provide to protect us in case of an emergency, and all their contact info, which I was obviously sharing with her just to help, convince her that CIE is trustworthy and I will be safe as I can during this program. And yeah, I think that's
Yeah, I could also relate to Tiffany, especially about the part where she said she showed her parents like other people who also did it. That was a big part of convincing my parents because while my parents were as hesitant, I could still tell that they were a bit on the fence about it. But I knew a lot of people just like me who went, so showing them that really convinced them. Also, a lot of it was also about the money, and so I just had to reassure to them that CIE has great scholarship opportunities. And on top of that, the other program I was on will be paying for everything else that didn't get covered. So yeah, I think the scholarship is what really made them okay with me going.
So what I'm hearing is that you guys did extensive research prior to going there to help, convince your guardians for you to be able to go. But as we all know, sometimes we can plan and plan and some things not work out. And some of those things that can happen during traveling are microaggressions. So I know from my experience abroad, it can go from people taking pictures of you when you're not looking, or, I've been called Beyonce and I love Beyonce, but I know I don't look like Beyonce. So like certain things like that. So I just want to hear about you guys' experience if you're comfortable, giving some examples of things that occurred to you and how you were able to handle them, whether that was on your own, through a program leader, host, mother, father, etc. ENT words?
Yeah, I had some experience with like microaggressions and racism, but not a lot of it. Because my program was in Rabat, which I feel is a more diverse city. But when we did go on the overnight trip to Chef Shawan, we did encounter some microaggressions. Like me and my program, a lot of my friends were also Black and Muslim. So when we were walking in Chef Shawan, they would like yell Mama Africa, which it was kind of weird because we're in Africa and they're also African. But I mean, we didn't take it to heart. We know that that wasn't of like malicious intent, but there was also another situation where we were in a restaurant and these kids started saying slurs. But we talked to our program manager about it and she handled it. She told the kids' moms and they apologized to us. But yeah, that also I didn't take it to heart because they were kids and maybe they didn't know what it meant, but I didn't want to let that ruin my whole trip. And I think Sai does a really good job at preparing you for those situations because before we went on that trip, we were told that this is like a smaller city and that type of stuff has happened on the other sessions of the program. So we were kind of ready and prepared to handle that.
Thank you for
I
sharing.
know
Go ahead.
me personally, I didn't have any problems with people like treating me any differently in Korea. I know that our overnight trip got canceled to go like farther into the countryside and leave more of the city area. So I think it definitely would have been a little different had we been able to go on that overnight trip. I think, however, I felt really comfortable in Korea as a Black woman because of like how modern it is and it's like a tourist city, so the people there are pretty much used to seeing a lot of like different nationalities there just going about their business. And I think I had a I also had a really good experience because a lot of my program leaders were also women of color, and they I really looked up to them because they were able to speak in Korean, handle situations, and everything was going good for them. And so I kind of got a confidence boost while I was there. And I was like, if they can do it, I can do it too.
I'd say for Italy, I didn't have any I didn't have any racist experiences in Italy. There was this one time I was called Lady Gaga, which I thought was really funny because, I don't really look that day I heard. But it was funny because they were trying to sell me something. I was like, oh, no, thank you. They're like, come on, Lady Gaga. But it's not the point. The point is that some stuff did happen to my classmates. But CI also found a way for us to know how to solve the problems and everything.
Just like Dana, I didn't experience anything racist, and if I did, it would have gone over my head. But I think there was only one instance of something that it wasn't really uncomfortable to me, but it could be to others. And it was I went to a convenience store and I went to buy water. And then the man who was selling it, he started talking to me and saying I was very beautiful. And I was like, oh, thank you. And he was like we should get married. Like, how old are you? He was like, you look 20. And I don't look 20 at all. I look very much my age. So I knew he was just saying that. But he was telling me to give him a kiss on the cheek, on the lips. And then I was like, no. And he was on the cheek and I was like, no. And then he gave me free candy and free water. And then I left. I did not go back there. And it didn't really make me uncomfortable. I was just it was a little odd. I was just it was just odd in general. Right. Sarah, would you like to add anything?
I didn't really have quite a bad experience racially as I'm Asian in an Asian country and I don't really appear too dark or anything like that. But as a group, we did get stared at a lot and we did have photos taken of us at times, but it was just more of a laughable thing. And it was something that we expected as foreigners. And that was pretty much it.
So something I'm hearing as everyone talks about their different experiences is culture and how our culture is very different from the culture of the places you guys might have traveled. For example, the bargaining and being in your face culture is very much more prevalent in other parts of the world than it is in America. So a question I have is culture shock. If you had a culture shock, how did you experience that culture shock? How did you deal with your culture shock? And what did you take away from having culture shock?
I didn't really experience culture shock, but it was the aspect of people being really close to each other. But since I'm Hispanic, I feel that's already part of my culture. And so I was not it wasn't too different for me. But there were the aspects of when you for example, for breakfast, everything was really sweet. And it was they would have little espresso shots and it was just different ways that they did things. And it was you couldn't you weren't it was weird to have a certain type of coffee after a certain type of day, certain time of hour. So there was just these little differences. And also the fact that it was common, it's not common for people to leave their homes once they graduated high school. Our teacher, she left her home at 26 and that was still young. And so it was just that aspect of independence and how people are really family oriented. That was interesting to me, but I didn't really experience much culture shock.
And also the social aspect of it. I'm from New York City, so if you're walking around and talking to random people, nobody is gonna respond to you. No one's gonna give you the time of day. But in Morocco, walking around, you start up conversations with the most random people. But I really like that. I feel like it was a really fun part of study abroad. because they were just so open to starting conversation, like, where are you from? Like, why are you here? And yeah, I really like that.
How different traditional Korean high school is versus my school here in California.
Tia, Dana, who's gonna go first? Okay, there we go.
Can I go first?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, I agree. I didn't have much of a culture shock. Rather, it was actually the opposite. Like I said before, I was born and raised in India. I only moved to the US a couple of years ago. And so it was really like I was going home. Like the weather was just my weather. It was like when I grew up. The people were welcoming. The environment, like the neighborhood, the like walks down the into town and the stores and the little vendors and just the stalls and the way that like people carry about their days was very much like I was used to. And I loved seeing that because it's so different in America. And so rather than be shocked by it, I embraced it. I was welcoming the change. I was so happy to experience something like I've experienced growing up in a different place with a different culture, with a different language. Um, yeah, it was very like touching.
The shock that I had was that they didn't have ranch because we would have fries, and at least me, I eat my fries with ranch. And so I asked the first time I knew was in our hotel. They gave us fries with chicken, and I asked the waiter, "Hey, do you guys have any like ranch packets?" And she was like, um, I don't know what that is. And I was like, "Oh, girl, I got you." And I show her a picture on Google of ranch, and she's like, "Oh, we don't have that here." And I was surprised, or maybe I thought, oh, maybe she didn't understand me, but it's okay. It's okay. I'm fine. And then we went to a restaurant, and I asked again because we had fries and chicken again. They're like, we don't have that here in Italy, not here. He told me in English, and so I was like, okay, so it doesn't exist here is what I'm getting at. And I asked my program leader again. She's like, yeah, that doesn't exist here. What even is that? And I was like, oh, it's like dressing for like your salad. She's like, we only use olive oil. We don't use that. And I was like, are you kidding me? Last one was one of our like hotel rooms were flooding, something like that. And so I was like, guys, we could sorry. And I was like, guys, we could just go to Home Depot. And then my program leader's like, we're in Italy. We don't have that here. Oh, okay. So clearly there's some things that we have here that you guys don't have here. So that was like the biggest culture shock that I had, even though it's probably like pretty obvious to guess that they didn't have it. You know, it's my first time in Italy. It's my first time outside of the US. So I didn't really know, but it was a pretty good experience. It was pretty funny to like, understand what they do and don't have. So yeah.
The urban planning of Seoul was so beautiful and such a different, very contrasting to my neighborhood in LA. It was a lot cleaner, and I like how the streets were paved. Sometimes there was cobblestone, sometimes there was regular concrete. It was just very fun and nice to look at, and I love to see all the traditional architecture kind of embedded with the modern like landscape. And then also the food and snacks were surprisingly cheap. And I think it's because coming from such an expensive place, seeing and being able to get a drink for like $1, $2 was absolutely mind blowing to me.
Yeah, amazing point. When you leave the US, you'll definitely realize that we lack walkable cities. So thank you for sharing. Miriam, do you have anything to add? Awesome. All right, guys, we're going to wrap up with our last question of the evening. If you guys were to be approached by a friend or a cousin that was interested in studying abroad and they too were a student of color, what amazing experience did you have that you would share with them to convince them to study abroad? So just one great activity experience that you had when you were studying abroad.
I would definitely tell them to interact with the locals. I was kind of scared. I know I chose Korea because of the language, and so that way I would be more motivated to keep studying my Korean. But I was still kind of shy and kind of scared because you're in a whole different country. There's no English to fall back on. Well, there's always English, but not really. And these are strangers who you're probably making their first impression as a foreigner, or especially like a person of color. But I would definitely say interact with the locals. The high school students that I met and that I still talk to now, like over Instagram and other apps, were so nice and kind. Even when I made a mistake or used the wrong particle or the wrong word or whatever, they were very understanding and sweet and helped me learn more things, especially about like slang and culture, young kids and kids my age, but also talking to adults.
Definitely agree. I think sometimes we think people are judging us from afar, but when you start to talk to them, you realize that they are just as curious about you as you are with them. So those, things go away once you start talking to them. Anybody else? I think Miriam's off mute.
Yeah, I agree 100% with talking to locals. I think that was one of the best parts of my trips personally, especially like the convenience stores by the school. I cried with the last time I saw like the convenience store worker. And our program manager gave us flowers to give to him, and he was really nice. Also, just be open to meeting new people. Me and one of my friends that was on the program, we were motivated to go to Morocco because some TikToks that we saw from someone else who went to Morocco, and then we saw her in Morocco studying abroad again. So we talked to her, and we also talked to the people who are on her program. So yeah, I would say be open, and like this is kind of a one in a lifetime opportunity. So just be open and don't be shy.
Great advice. Anyone else want to share something? What they would tell someone?
I'd,
Go ahead.
I'd say for me, something I'd tell my cousin or my friend is be really open minded about the difference in the culture, whether it's manners, language, and all that type of stuff. Because even though we are not used to it, I think it's also a really good way for us to like adapt to different cultures. And so to me, having to adapt, obviously to me, it wasn't that hard having to adapt to like somebody getting really close to me, giving me like a kiss on the cheek, because that's how my culture is. But I think like seeing some of my classmates grow from like be like, oh, I don't want you to be too close to like letting them be too close to them because that's how the culture is in Italy was like a really big growth. And another big one is like learning about the history of the country that you're in. We went to like a museum called Welcome to Rome, and it's like my favorite moment that I ever went to Italy because it shows us the story of how the city was developed from like start to finish. Those were my favorite moments, and something I would really recommend somebody is to be really open minded about the different culture they have compared to here.
That's a great point. I think being open-minded, in the same aspect that you can make mistakes. I think a lot of people are afraid, like, oh, I may do something wrong, or I might say, say the wrong verb or whatever. But when you go on with an open mind, you're willing to talk to those people. Usually they are just happy that you're so comfortable speaking their language and wanting to know their history and culture that they'll appreciate all your efforts. So great point. Anyone else want to add to that?
I am conscious of time, and most of what I've wanted to say is like has been said already. Definitely talk to locals. I spent a lot of time with kids because it was a leadership and service program that I went on. Um, and they really show you how much they just want to get to know you. Like, they don't care whether or not you know the language. They don't care whether or not, like, what the color of your skin is. They don't care whether you like football or not. They just wanna tell you about how much they like football, and they just wanna know your favorite color, um, and what it's like to live in the US. And I think if you take that mindset of just being very open and just learning for the sake of learning um, abroad when you study abroad, I think that makes a lot of a difference.
Great point. I definitely think kids are our best teachers. I think they show you can communicate without language, whether that's playing a little game with them. I don't know if any of you guys had host siblings and you probably were speaking like broken Spanish or broken Korean with them, but they were having a ball. Like they're like, this is so fun. And you're just, yeah. So great time. I would definitely highly recommend people hanging out with kids during their time. Anyone else?
I would just say be open to the people in like the program and know that like you're probably only going to be with them for a month. And so like usually like getting close to people takes more than a month. But since everything felt so much faster there, it was like after a week, we were already like going into each other's rooms and just hanging out the whole night, just got really close. And I'd say that it would be important to like maintain your relationships with them because personally, most of my friends, they don't live in like Boston, but we saw each other like 2 weeks ago for winter break and we hadn't seen each other since August. And it was like a surprise birthday thing for one of my other friends. It was like so much fun. And I actually didn't think I'd maintain relationships with people just because since we'd only known each other for a month, I doubted we would like keep being close, but like I was wrong and we were. And even if we didn't talk like all the time, we still had that connection and like being back together. It was like we were in Rome and like the conversation flowed and it was like so nice. And it was just like those relationships I have with those people, like I'm going to cherish them because like they're really important to me.
Makes me so happy. I think nothing bonds people more than just being like a group of clueless people in a foreign country. And you just get to learn. And I'm like, I studied abroad, 10 years ago? And my roommate is my best friend. Like, she lives like 5 minutes up the road, and we hang out like 3 times a week. Because just being stuck like in a room together and only like surviving with each other definitely is life changing. So, any last comments? No. Well,
Wait,
go
yeah, I
ahead,
wanted to
Justin.
say something. I just wanted to say, like, y'all are very mature and like y'all are very cool people, and I really just hope the best for y'all and that y'all flourish and hope you study abroad again in college because again, it's very rare to honestly, I thought I was talking to college students this whole time. I kind of forgot y'all were high school students. I had to keep reminding myself they're high school students, but that just goes to say like very mature and just wish you all the best, like on all your endeavors and always come back to CIEE. I'm biased. I think it's the best study abroad company, and it really is because they care about you through the end from beginning to end. But yeah, best of luck, everyone.
Definitely to piggyback off of Justin, you guys are amazing. I don't know if you know, but only like less than 2% of high school students study abroad. And I would probably bet it's like 0.5% for students of color. So you guys are already taking the steps to just changing what study abroad looks like in the future. And I wish you guys nothing but the best. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's going to be a great episode that's going to help so many people because we get so many questions. And so I'm just really happy that we're able to provide this resource to students, and it's coming from you guys. So thank you so much. And if you need anything from us, you're great. Love you guys. But anyway, if you guys need anything, definitely hit us up. And I'm sure Brianna has some closing marketing words.
No, so thank you guys again to all of you. I mean, all of these students are global ambassadors with me. So I knew coming in, I was like, these are my babies and they're gonna rock it. And you did. Thank you so much for opening up, for being vulnerable, for talking about your positive experiences and looking at this experience with a critical, mature lens, right? To see how much you learned, to look back and reflect on how much you learned and how much you grew and how much, you know, your horizons were also broadened by going abroad and experiencing these new cultures. Thank you also to Justin and Amira, fabulous tag team, amazing job. Thank you so much for your questions. Amazing conversation. I was sitting here watching this conversation, like, it can go on for 3 hours. That's fine. Because it was so interesting and it was so good and engaging. So thank you all. And thank you everybody who tuned in. I know that this was definitely a very helpful conversation for so many students that are hopefully listening to this podcast across the country, right? So thank you so much. And maybe we'll have you back on for another episode. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to Out of Your Comfort Zone. For more information on high school study abroad programs, visit ciee.org/global navigator.